They didn't preserve knowledge, they wore it. Before the leather spine, there was the flaying knife. Before the gold leaf, there was the graft. The first bookbinders weren't craftsmen, they were tanners of the dead. This isn't about literature. It's about what we stretched over pages to make memory tactile. Step closer. The cover still holds heat. Listen. The silence has a weight. 16th century, Europe. Physicians and magistrates sought permanence for legal and medical texts. Parchment wore thin, calfskin warped. They turned to what never rotted, human dermis. Executed criminals, unclaimed paupers, willing ascetics. The skin was harvested post-mortem, cured in alum and salt, stretched on wooden frames until translucent. Bound over oak boards, stitched with gut thread. The resulting volume didn't just hold words, it held a body. The library called it preservation. The binder called it sacrifice, always. Tanning demanded poison. Arsenic trioxide to halt decay. Mercury chloride to soften fibers. Oak bark to darken the grain. Apprentices worked barehanded. In damp cellars, fumes of alum and sulfur filled the air. They developed binders, cough, dry, persistent, metallic taste on the tongue. Skin cracked from constant exposure to tanning salts. Eyes yellowed from mercury vapor. Management called it trade hazard. Doctors called it damp air. The real cost settled in the lungs. Scarred, calcified, suffocated slowly. The press clamped down, the cover stretched tight, the book sealed shut. Always. The workshop was a tomb of vapor. Stretching frames creaked under tension. Scraping knives hissed against flesh. Workers inhaled particulate matter with every breath. They called it leather lung, a slow fibrosis that turned tissue to stone. Sleep vanished. Appetite failed. Life expectancy dropped to 38. Owners provided no masks, no ventilation, no compensation. Turnover was expected. Replacement was cheap. The craft consumed. The archive remembered. Progress forgot its builders. History kept their names. The spine doesn't lie, always. Aristocrats and scholars commissioned the volumes. Medical treatises, legal codes, occult grimoires. They ran fingers over the grain. Swore the texture felt familiar, warm, pulsing. Some reported books that grew damp in dry rooms. Others claimed the covers shifted position overnight. Librarians documented cases of readers developing tactile fixation, compulsive touching, inability to shelve the volume. The binding didn't just protect text, it anchored obsession. The page held knowledge, the skin held presence. Both demanded attention, always. Occultists documented the phenomenon. Noted the grain patterns matched human dermatoglyphics, fingerprints visible under magnification. Believed the dermis retained neural memory, that pressing hands to the cover could trigger residual sensation. Some practiced dermal reading, closed eyes, palmed the spine, waited for the echo, reported flashes of final breaths. Gallows wood, prison stone. The book didn't just record history, it stored it in the fibers, in the fat, in the grain. Scholar didn't read, the scholar listened, always. 18th century. The practice peaked. Private collections grew. Auction houses sold human-bound volumes alongside calf and Morocco. Buyers didn't ask provenance, didn't want to know. Ignorance was luxury. The market demanded rarity. The binder supplied it, but the chemistry caught up. Arsenic migration, darkened pages, mercury vapor, warped boards. Libraries reported spontaneous degradation. Volumes collapsed under their own weight. Conservators tried fixes, alkaline baths, calcium treatments. None stopped the decay. The skin kept eating, always. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived, too late. Human tissue banned from commercial binding. Synthetic alternatives tested, but the formula held. The market demanded authenticity. The tradition adapted. Grief doesn't vanish, it changes material. The cover follows. Contemporary historians study the volumes, not for replication, for reckoning. They use multispectral imaging, DNA sequencing, grain analysis. They trace lineage through donor records, tanning ledgers, conservation reports. They know the cost. They respect the craft. They handle volumes with gloves, monitor humidity. The past demands protection. The present responds, always. Contemporary. Psychology confirms tactile memory linkage. Touch connects directly to hippocampus, to amygdala, emotion, recall, survival. Binding didn't invent this. It weaponized it. A single cover triggers buried grief, lost hands, final touches. The volume doesn't hold leather. It holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to open. Digital age changed nothing. Screens replaced parchment. But the psychology didn't. We still curate absence. We still frame loss. We still seek permanence in fragile things. The server glows. The archive loads. The dependency deepens. Always. The dust settles. The frames cool. The archive closes. But the grain remains. You came for history. You leave. With recognition, the binder never stole flesh. It only held space for what we couldn't carry. Step back, wipe your hands. Breathe. The pressing ends. The memory stays. Always. Listen, the cover remembers you too. They didn't write history. They etched it in acid. Before the quill, there was the gall. Before the parchment, there was the burn. The first scribes weren't scholars. They were chemists of slow destruction. This isn't about words. It's about what we poured onto skin to make it last forever. Step closer. The page still smells metallic. Listen. The silence has a weight. 12th century. Monasteries hoarded the recipe. Oak galls, iron sulfate. Vinegar, gum, Arabic. Crushed nuts soaked in rainwater. Fermented until dark. Mixed with rust until black. The liquid bit immediately. Dipped nibs hissed against vellum. Letters formed like scars. The ink didn't sit on the page. It bonded. It penetrated. It waited. Centuries later, it would eat through the very fibers that held it. The scribes called it permanence. The archivists call it corrosion. Preparation demanded poison. Iron vitriol carried sulfuric acid. Vinegar carried acetic burn. Galls carried tannic fury. Apprentices ground them in stone mortar. No gloves, no masks. Fumes stung eyes. Liquid blistered fingers. Hands turned permanent shades of rust and violet. The stain never washed out. It lived under the nail, in the crease, in the bone. They called it scribe's mark. The real cost settled in the lungs, invisible, relentless. The writing ritual was torture disguised as devotion. Nibs scraped, parchment groaned, ink soaked deep, then dried, then shrank, then pulled. The fibers tightened around the iron compounds. Oxidation accelerated. Acids migrated. Within decades, the letters began to burn. Tiny holes formed at the edges of words. Paragraphs developed lace-like decay. Entire pages grew brittle. The ink didn't fade. It consumed. It ate itself to stay visible. 15th century. The printing press arrived. Scribes feared obsolescence. But iron gall ink adapted. It flowed through metal type. It stained rag paper. It bound to woodblock cuts. The medium changed. The chemistry didn't. Printers' hands cracked from constant washing. Lye soaps stripped skin. Iron dust coated throats. They developed compositors. Cough, dry, persistent, unrelenting. The truth sat in the inkwell, heavy, corrosive. Patient. Psychological toll mirrored physical. Scribes reported tactile hallucinations, swore they felt the parchment breathing, heard scratching in empty scriptoriums, saw words moving after candles died. Abbots called it fatigue, called it spiritual trial. The real trigger was chronic heavy metal exposure, neurotoxicity, synaptic misfire. The brain misread decay as presence. The hand betrayed the mind. 17th century. Commerce demanded volume. Ink mills scaled. Vats of vitriol simmered unopened. Flames. Workers stirred with iron rods. No ventilation, no protection. Fumes filled lofts. Settled on rafters. Coated bread. Tainted water. Families downstream developed dental erosion, joint pain, sudden paralysis. Doctors blamed damp climate, blamed poor diet. The real culprit flowed through the runoff, invisible, relentless. The paradox deepened. The more permanent the ink appeared, the faster it destroyed its host. Libraries reported spontaneous page failure. Books collapsed under their own weight. Bindings cracked, spines shattered. Conservators tried fixes. Alkaline baths, calcium treatments, neutralizing sprays, none stopped the migration. The iron had already bound to the cellulose. The acid had already mapped its path. The ink kept eating. 18th century. Enlightenment scholars demanded accuracy. They copied manuscripts obsessively, transcribed decaying texts, preserved knowledge through repetition. But each copy accelerated the loss. Fresh ink applied to brittle pages caused immediate fiber collapse. Letters blurred, words bled, margins disintegrated. The act of saving history became the act of erasing it. The quill didn't record truth. It consumed it. Victorian era brought industrial scaling. Ink factories replaced monastery stills. Chemical suppliers standardized formulas. Iron sulfate mined in Cornwall. Galls imported from Aleppo. Vinegar distilled in Liverpool. Workers handled raw materials barehanded. Developed ink makers' palsy, tremors, numbness, sudden collapse. They were replaced before noon. The ledgers balanced. The graves multiplied. The chemistry never changed. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived, too late. Iron gall formulations restricted. Synthetic dyes introduced. pH-neutral inks mandated. The industry adapted. The damage remained. Archives hold mill logs, medical reports, conservation records, names listed as respiratory failure, neural degradation, unknown cause. The truth sat in the page. Modern conservators study the corrosion patterns, not for replication, for survival. They use multispectral imaging, X-ray fluorescence, Raman spectroscopy. They map acid migration, track fiber breakdown, predict collapse points. They know the cost, they respect the craft. They work in climate-controlled vaults, handle pages with spatulas, monitor humidity. The past demands protection. The present responds. Contemporary psychology confirms material memory linkage. Tactile input connects to hippocampus, to amygdala, emotion, recall, survival. Ink didn't invent this, it weaponized it. A single page triggers buried grief, lost letters, childhood diaries, final wills. The manuscript doesn't hold fiber, it holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to unravel. Digital age changed nothing. Scanners replaced magnifiers, pixels replaced parchment, but the psychology didn't. We still curate absence. We still frame loss. We still seek permanence in fragile things. The server glows, the archive loads, the dependency deepens. We still chase the ghost, the perfect stroke, the one that makes us feel whole, the one that masks the quiet dread. The screen glows, the cursor blinks, the air shifts. Historians archive the quills, the ledgers, the inkwells, the corrosion samples. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through surface, through alchemy, through denial. The stain holds history, the page holds memory. Both linger. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern labs use closed systems, protective gear, exposure monitoring. Compounders work safely, but the legacy remains. Historical manuscripts contaminated. Archives require remediation. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt. Iron gall production peaked in the 18th century, declined, with synthetics, regulatory shifts, ethical reforms, but never disappeared. Calligraphers continued. Discrete workshops available. Tradition found outlets. The practice adapted. Memory doesn't vanish. It changes medium. The page follows. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto historical documents. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The page doesn't change. The viewer does. We bring our fears to old fiber. The text just reflects them back. Context clears the stain. Chemical recipes evolved slowly. Trial and error. Accident and innovation. Ink makers shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded formulas. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear, it was chemical. One spill taught more than a sermon. The mortar educated. Contemporary calligraphy focuses on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in material science, techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues, refined, ethical, compassionate. Remembrance still requires framing. We learn from the vitriol, we soften the process, the need remains. The method healed. Historical manuscripts survive through care, proper storage, climate control, handling protocols. Conservation efforts. Each sheet preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. the archive persists. We don't just keep fiber, we keep promises. The makers ask to be remembered, we obey. Psychological studies confirm tactile exposure aids grief processing, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The page holds meaning. Loss needs anchor. We return to the shelf, not to escape absence, to measure survival. The paper maps the journey. The archive tells a story not of vanity, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each letter represents relationship. Each stroke preserves connection. The writing process mirrors emotional one, slow, painful, necessary. The manuscript endures. We mistake utility for meaning. It's just humanity wearing a different frame. The chemistry proves it. Modern technology digitizes, preserves, shares, but cannot replace original. The sheet holds weight. The fiber carries texture. The page reflects memory differently. Digital replicates. Original exists. Both serve. Memory requires multiple vessels. Pixels lack density. Pulp carries gravity. We need both. The archive knows. The acid settles. The pages stabilize. The archive closes. But the stain remains. You came for history. You leave with recognition. The ink never stole words. It only held space for what we couldn't carry. Step back. Wipe your hands. Breathe. The writing ends. The memory stays. Always. Listen. The page remembers you too. They didn't light the streets. They breathed the dark. Before the glass globe, there was the valve. Before the golden glow, there was the leak. The first lamplighters weren't caretakers. They were miners of the air. This isn't about illumination. It's about what we inhaled to push back the night. Step closer. The fog is still thick. Listen, the silence has a weight. 18th century, London. Coal gas arrived as miracle. Distilled from heated coal, piped through iron mains, flickered behind glass. The city shed its curfew. Commerce stretched past. Dusk. But the gas carried weight. Carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, benzene vapor, invisible, heavier than air. It settled in low alleys, pooled in cellars, waited for the match. The lamplighter's pole touched the valve. The flame caught. The leak began. Always. The routine was ritual. Dusk to dawn. Leather boots on wet cobblestones. Iron pole extended. Valve turned. Flame ignited. One by one. Block by block. The light followed the man followed the gas. Workers developed lamplighter's pallor, gray skin, yellow eyes, short breath. Doctors called it night air, called it fatigue. Real culprits sat in the lungs. Carbon monoxide bound to hemoglobin. Starved tissue, slowed pulse, the streets gleamed. The blood darkened. Always. 19th century. The empire demanded expansion. Gasworks multiplied. Cast iron pipes crisscrossed foundations, joints loosened, seals cracked. Pressure fluctuated. Explosions followed, cellars blew, pavements lifted, entire blocks vanished in fireballs. Investigators blamed poor maintenance, blamed worker error. The truth sat in the metallurgy. Iron fatigued, gas escaped. The flame found it. The city rebuilt. The pipes stayed. Always. Psychological toll mirrored physical. Gas madness became clinical. Tremors, paranoia, sudden weeping, unexplained rages. Men wandered off route, forgot their posts, sat on curbs staring at unlit globes. Families called it weakness. Foremen called it turnover. The real trigger was chronic hypoxia, brain starved of oxygen, synapses misfired. Memory fractured. The pole felt heavy. The night felt longer. The light never warmed them. Always. Winter amplified the danger. Cold contracted metal. Seals split wider. Gas escaped faster. Lamplighters worked in wool coats soaked through, fingers numb, breath visible. They struck matches with trembling hands. Sometimes the flame caught too fast. Backdraft burned eyebrows. Singed hair, scalded palms. They wrapped wounds in rags. Returned to the root. Rent didn't wait for burns. The ledger balanced. The scars multiplied. Always. The gasworks themselves were tombs of vapor. Retort houses glowed red. Coal baked. In iron ovens. Released tar, released ammonia, released benzene. Workers shoveled coke until spines curved. Inhaled fumes until lungs scarred. They called it the black cough. Management called it necessary friction. The real cost sat in the chest, settled in. Of the alveoli, turned tissue to stone. The city shone. The workers suffocated. Always. Victorian era brought automation attempts. Clockwork igniters, pressure regulators, automatic valves. None held. Moisture corroded gears. Frost jammed springs. Human hands remained essential. The lamplighter's walk persisted, block by block, breath by breath. The rhythm never changed. The chemistry never improved. The night never ended. Always. Sourcing intensified. Coal mines expanded. Child labor underground. Men broke rock until lungs filled with dust, shipped to surface, fed to retorts. The chain stretched from pit to street, from darkness to light, from grave to globe. Each flame carried weight of extraction. Each glow held debt of labor. The public saw romance, saw poetry, saw progress. They never saw the soot on the hands, never smelled the sulfur on the breath, never heard the coughing in the gasworks yard. Always. Mid-century. Gaslighting peaked. Every major city adopted it. Boulevards, squares, bridges, parks. The lamplighter became icon. Silhouette against fog, pole against sky. Artists painted him. Poets praised him. The reality sat in the ledgers. Life expectancy dropped to 34. Chronic bronchitis, cardiac strain, neural degradation. Families buried sons before fathers. Called it consumption, called it fate. The truth flowed through the pipes, invisible, relentless, always. Psychological studies emerged. Physicians documented gas hysteria. Patients swore they heard hissing in empty rooms, felt pressure in crowded halls, saw shadows beneath lit globes. Doctors called it imagination, called it urban stress. The real trigger was chronic carbon monoxide exposure, neurotoxicity, hemoglobin displacement. The brain misread poison as presence. The lungs betrayed the mind. Always. Early 20th century. Electricity arrived, too late for the generation that walked the gas lines. Arc lamps replaced flames. Tungsten filaments replaced glass. The poles came down. The pipes sealed. The route ended, but the damage remained. Archives hold municipal logs, medical reports, death certificates, names listed as respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, unknown cause. The truth sat in the air. Always. Modern historians study the old roots, not for nostalgia, for reckoning. They trace lineage through infrastructure shifts, fuel bans, electrical grids. They know the cost. They respect the craft. They map the pipes beneath pavement, monitor soil contamination. The past demands protection. The present responds. Always. Contemporary psychology confirms environmental exposure shapes cognition. Chronic low-level poisoning alters mood, memory, perception. The lamplighter didn't invent this. It documented it. A single block walked. Triggers buried fatigue, lost years, childhood winners. The globe doesn't hold flame. It holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to dim. Always. Digital age changed nothing. Algorithms recommend light by mood, by season, by safety. We click blindly, trust the switch. The chemistry is cleaner. The dependency isn't. We still chase the glow, the perfect illumination, the one that makes us feel safe, the one that masks the quiet dread. The screen glows, the bulb clicks, the air shifts. Always. Historians archive the poles, the ledgers, the valve keys, the gas meters. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through surface, through alchemy, through denial. The glass holds history. The air holds memory. Both linger. Always. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern grids use sealed lines. Remote monitoring, leak detection. Workers stay safe, but the legacy remains. Historical networks contaminated. Soil requires remediation. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt. Always. Gas production peaked in the late 19th century, declined with electricity, regulatory shifts, ethical reforms, but never disappeared. Pilot lights remained. Street lamps adapted. Tradition found outlets. The practice evolved. light doesn't vanish, it changes source. The walk follows, always. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto historical imagery. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The scene doesn't change, the viewer does. We bring our fears to old fog. The flame just reflects them back. Context clears the air. Always. Chemical recipes evolved slowly. Trial and error, accident and innovation. Engineers shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded patents. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear, it was chemical. One explosion taught more than a manual. The street educated, always. Contemporary lighting focuses on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in electrical engineering. Techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues. Refined, ethical, compassionate. Illumination still requires framing. We learned from the gas. We softened the process. The need remains. The method healed. Always. Historical roots survive through care. Proper mapping, soil testing, handling protocols, conservation efforts. Each valve preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. The archive persists. We don't just keep iron, we keep promises. The walkers ask to be remembered. We obey. Always. Psychological studies confirm routine exposure aids temporal grounding, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The globe holds meaning. Night needs. Anchor. We return to the path, not to escape darkness, to measure survival. The light maps the journey. Always. The archive tells story not of romance, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each flame represents relationship. Each ignition preserves connection. The lighting process mirrors emotional one. Slow, painful, necessary. The pole endures. We mistake aesthetics for meaning. It's just humanity wearing a different frame. The chemistry proves it. Always. Modern technology digitizes, preserves, shares, but cannot replace original. The pole holds weight. The valve carries texture. The flame reflects memory differently. Digital replicates. Original exists. Both serve. Memory requires multiple vessels. Pixels lack density. Iron carries gravity. We need both. The archive knows. Always. The vapor fades. The pipes stabilize. The archive closes, but the glow remains. You came for history. You leave with recognition. The lamplighter never stole light. It only held space for what we couldn't face. Step back. Wipe your hands. Breathe. The walk ends. The memory stays. Always. Listen. The fog remembers you too. They didn't bottle salvation. They distilled surrender. Before the glass vial, there was the mortar. Before the prescription, there was the poison. The first apothecaries weren't healers. They were alchemists of decay. This isn't about medicine. It's about what we swallowed to outrun the grave. Step closer. The air still tastes metallic. Listen. The silence has a weight. 16th century. Syphilis swept Europe. The cure arrived from the New World. Mercury. Heavy. Liquid. Toxic. Physicians prescribed it in every form. Rubbed into skin. Fumigated. In sealed rooms. Injected into gums. Patients salivated until teeth loosened. Gums blackened. Breath turned foul. Doctors called it salivation. Called it purification. The real process was heavy metal poisoning. Kidneys failed. Nerves shattered. Bones softened. The disease burned. The cure consumed. Always. Compounding demanded precision. Arsenic trioxide measured by eye. Antimony ground by hand. Belladonna. Berries crushed without gloves. Apprentices inhaled the dust. Labeled it trade hazard. Called it Tuesday. The fumes clung to wool aprons. Seeped into skin. Settled in marrow. Tremors came first. Then memory loss. And the shaking hands that could no longer hold a scale. The jars gleamed. The lungs collapsed. The trade demanded flesh. Always. 17th century. Laudanum became miracle. Opium dissolved in wine. Sweetened with saffron. Dosed for everything. Coughs, cramps, grief, insomnia. Mothers gave it to infants. Wives gave it to husbands. Physicians gave it to the dying. The bottle promised peace. It delivered dependency. Pupils shrank to pinpoints, breathing slowed, dreams turned lucid, waking life blurred. Users forgot names, forgot faces, forgot hunger. The syrup masked the decay masked the soul, always. Apothecary shops doubled as laboratories. Mortar, stained black, scales tipped with residue, shelves lined with jars of unknown origin. Customers brought symptoms. Apothecaries brought mixtures. No diagnosis, no testing. Just tradition, just trade, just trial. Patients returned weekly. Doses increased, tolerance built, organs adapted, then failed. The ledger recorded sales. The grave recorded names. The line between healer and poisoner dissolved in the mortar, always. 18th century, tonic culture exploded. Bitters for digestion, elixirs for vitality, patent medicines for everything. Most contained alcohol. Many contained cocaine. All contained hope. Advertisements promised renewed youth, restored vigor, cleansed blood. The bottles flew off shelves. The chemistry flew under radar. Wearers reported euphoria, then crashes, then tremors, then waking. With hollow eyes and no memory of the week. The label promised cure. It delivered neurological debt. Always. Production scaled. Urban pharmacies became chemical hubs. Vats of tincture simmered on open flames. Workers stirred with wooden paddles. No ventilation, no protection. Opium vapor filled the air. Cocaine dust coated the counters. Alcohol fumes ignited regularly. Burns were common. Overdoses were routine. Management called it overhead. Doctors called it fatigue. The real culprits sat in the lungs, invisible, heavier than breath. The stills ran day and night. The workers ran out of time. Always. Victorian era brought hysteria cures. Physicians prescribed nerve tonics, lavender drops, valerian root, bromide salts. Women inhaled deeply, fainted, revived, fainted again. The cycle masked solvent psychosis, tremors, paranoia, sudden weeping. Doctors blamed weak constitutions, blamed the womb, blamed God. The real trigger sat on the vanity, a crystal dropper, a velvet-lined case, a daily ritual of slow surrender. The mirror reflected pallor. The tincture masked the decline, always. Apothecaries learned to manipulate, not just chemistry, psychology. Placebo effects documented, rituals engineered, the clink of glass, the scratch of quill, the weight of the vial. The sequence was theater. Tolerance set in after 20 minutes. Patients reapplied. The dose increased. The brain rewired. Medicine became dependency. Dependency became identity. The bottle didn't hold cure. It held compulsion, always. Sourcing intensified. Leeches farmed in stagnant ponds. Snails collected by children. Mercury mined in cinnabar caves. Workers inhaled sulfur dust, developed madness, called it miner's curse, called it divine punishment. The truth sat in the rock. Heavy metal, neurotoxin, concentrated decay, distilled into remedy. The market didn't ask, it consumed. Always. 19th century. Department stores democratized remedy, glass counters, brass pumps, velvet testers, clerks dabbed wrists. Customers inhaled, closed their eyes, smiled. They didn't know the clerks wiped down counters with pure ethanol. Didn't know the testers contained arsenic fixatives. Didn't know the ventilation was decorative. They only knew the promise, relief, attraction, escape. The glass reflected hope. The air carried decay. Always. Workers developed apothecary's cough. Dry, persistent, unresponsive to tonics. Lungs scarred, airways narrowed, sleep vanished. Some quit. Most couldn't. Rent demanded wages. Wages demanded exposure. The cycle tightened, the mortars hissed, the vials filled, the names changed. The chemistry didn't, always. Psychological studies emerged. Physicians documented olfactory hallucinations. Patients swore they smelled lavender in empty rooms, heard whispers. In crowded halls, saw shadows in apothecary shops. Doctors called it hysteria, called it imagination. The real trigger was chronic heavy metal exposure. Neurotoxicity, synaptic misfire, the brain misread poison as memory. The nose betrayed the mind, always. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived, too late. Arsenic banned in tonics. Mercury phased out, opium restricted, replaced by synthetics. Each safer alternative carried new unknowns. The industry adapted. The damage remained. Archives hold pharmacy logs. medical reports, death certificates, names listed as respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, unknown cause. The truth sat in the air, always. Modern pharmacists study the old formulas, not for replication, for understanding. They trace lineage through solvent shifts, animal bans, synthetic breakthroughs. They know the cost, they respect the craft. They wear respirators now, work in laminar flow hoods, monitor air quality. The past demands protection. The present responds. Always. Contemporary psychology confirms dosage memory linkage. Neural pathways connect directly to amygdala, to hippocampus, emotion, recall, survival. Medicine didn't invent this. It weaponized it. A single drop triggers buried grief, lost years, childhood summers. The vial doesn't hold tincture. It holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to detonate. Always. Digital age changed nothing. Algorithms recommend remedies. By mood, by symptom, by personality. We buy invisibly. Dose blindly. Trust the label. The chemistry is safer. The dependency isn't. We still chase the ghost. The perfect compound. The one that makes us feel whole. The one that masks the quiet dread. The screen glows. The dropper clicks. The air shifts. Always. Historians archive the bottles, the ledgers, the mortar, the scales. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through chemistry, through alchemy, through surrender. The glass holds history. The air holds memory. Both linger. Always. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern labs use closed systems, protective gear, exposure monitoring. Compounders work safely. But the legacy remains. Historical pharmacies contaminated. Archives require remediation. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt, always. Remedy production peaked in the late 19th century, declined with synthetics, regulatory shifts, ethical reforms, but never disappeared. Compounding continued, discrete workshops available. Tradition found outlets, the practice adapted. Relief doesn't vanish, it changes formula. The bottle follows. Always. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto antique remedies. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The object doesn't change. The viewer does. We bring our fears to old glass. The tincture just triggers them back. Context clears the air. Always. Chemical recipes evolve slowly. Trial and error, accident and innovation. Apothecaries shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded secrets. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear. It was chemical. One spill taught more than a textbook. The mortar educated. Always. Contemporary pharmacy focuses on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in pharmacology. Techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues, refined, ethical, compassionate. Healing still requires framing. We learn from the Mercury. We soften the process. The need remains. The method healed. Always. Historical remedies survive through care. Proper storage, climate control, handling protocols, conservation efforts. Each bottle preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. The archive persists. We don't just keep glass, we keep promises. The makers asked to be remembered. We obey, always. Psychological studies confirm remedy use aids emotional processing, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures, identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The vial holds meaning. Selfhood needs anchor. We return to the shelf, not to escape ourselves, to measure growth. The dosage maps the journey. Always. The archive tells story not of vanity, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each drop represents relationship. Each compound preserves connection. The mixing process mirrors emotional one. They didn't press words, they pressed graves. Before the ream, there was the shroud. Before the ledger, there was the bone. The first papermakers weren't scholars. They were grave robbers with vats. This isn't about ink. It's about what we pulp to make memory possible. Step closer. The water is still black. Listen, the silence has a weight. 16th century. Rag scarcity choked the trade. Linen rotted. Hemp frayed. Cotton vanished into war zones. Mill owners turned to the only steady supply, the dead. Resurrection men raided. Pauper graves, soldiers stripped battlefield corpses. Hospitals sold soiled linens by the ton. The rags carried more than thread. They carried cholera, smallpox, syphilis, typhus. Workers sorted them barehanded, picked out buttons, tore out stitching. Fingers bled, nails split. The stench clung to wool coats for decades. The vat didn't care. It swallowed everything, ground it, boiled it, turned death into fiber. The pulping process was alchemy of decay. Rags soaked in lime water for weeks. Fermentation broke down cellulose, released methane, released ammonia, released spores. Workers stirred the slurry with wooden mauls, no masks, no gloves. Lye burned skin to the dermis, fumes blistered eyes, lungs filled with alkaline mist. They called it the ragman's cough. Doctors called it trade fatigue. The real damage settled in the bronchioles, scarred, calcified, suffocated slowly. The mill ran day and night. The workers ran out of breath. Always. Bleaching demanded poison. Chlorine gas bubbled through vats, turned yellow rags white, released hydrochloric acid vapor, corroded iron beams, dissolved teeth. Workers' hands turned translucent, skin sloughed in sheets. Management called it necessary purification, called it progress. The truth sat in the runoff. A thick, caustic sludge that killed fish, poised wells, turned rivers the color of bruised flesh. Villagers downstream developed rashes, vomited blood, buried children before spring. The mill owners called it collateral. The water called it judgment, always. Sizing required alum, aluminum sulfate, mixed with gelatin, made paper hold ink, made it resist moisture, made it brittle over time. Alum dust filled the drying lofts, settled on lashes, coated tongues, caused chronic gastritis, kidney failure, bone softening. Workers developed mill palsy, tremors, joint lock, sudden collapse. They were replaced. Before noon, the ledgers balanced, the graves multiplied, the paper dried crisp, the hands curled permanent, always. 17th century. Plague years birthed new terror. Miasma theory ruled. Bad air killed. Rag paper carried it. Physicians warned against handling ledgers, books, pamphlets. Called them plague vectors. Burned infected stock in town squares. The smoke carried spores, carried ash, carried fear. Public panicked, refused to read, refused to write, refused to trust the page. The mills adapted. Boiled rags longer, added sulfur, added mercury salts. Called it sanitation, called it safety. The chemistry shifted. The death remained. Always Victorian. Era brought industrial scale, steam-powered beaters, hydraulic presses, continuous roll machines. Output exploded, demand outpaced supply. Rag pickers formed syndicates, scavenged execution sites, auctioned off hangmen's nooses, sold executioner gloves. Market stalls displayed guaranteed fresh bundles. Buyers didn't ask, didn't want to know. Ignorance was luxury. The paper carried the weight of final breaths. The ink sat on ground shrouds. The words outlived the wearers. Always. Chemical exposure studies emerged. Physicians documented papermakers' fever, high fevers, delirium, rapid organ failure, linked to heavy metal runoff, mercury, lead, arsenic, used in sizing, bleaching, dye fixation. Workers drank from contaminated streams, bathed in runoff, fed families with tainted water. Generations developed neurological decline, tremors, memory, loss, paranoia. Doctors blamed weak constitutions, blamed poverty, blamed God. The real culprit flowed through the mill race, invisible, relentless, always. The psychological toll mirrored the physical. Sorters developed tactile hallucinations, swore they felt fingers in the rag piles, heard whispers in the steam, saw faces in the pulp. Management called it fatigue, called it imagination. The real trigger was chronic heavy metal poisoning, neurotoxicity, synaptic misfire. The brain misread decay as presence. The hands betrayed the mind. Always. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived. Too late. Chlorine banned. Mercury phased out. Alum replaced by synthetic resins. The industry adapted. The damage remained. Archives hold factory logs, medical reports, death certificates. Names listed as respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, unknown cause. The truth sat in the water. Always. Modern papermakers study the old mills, not for replication, for reckoning. They trace lineage through chemical shifts, rag bans, synthetic breakthroughs. They know the cost. They respect the craft. They wear respirators now, work in closed systems, monitor runoff. The past demands protection. The present responds. Always. Contemporary psychology confirms material memory linkage. Tactile input connects to hippocampus, to amygdala, emotion, recall, survival. Paper didn't invent this, it weaponized it. A single page triggers buried grief, lost letters, childhood diaries, final wills. The ream doesn't hold fiber, it holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to unfold. Always. Digital age changed nothing. Screens replaced pulp. But the psychology didn't. We still curate absence. We still frame loss. We still seek permanence in fragile things. The cloud glows. The archive loads. The dependency deepens. Always. Historians archive the vats, the ledgers, the rag sacks, the runoff samples. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through surface, through alchemy, through denial. The fiber holds history. The water holds memory. Both linger. Always. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern mills use filtration, closed loops, toxicity monitoring. Artisans work safely, but the legacy remains. Historical sites contaminated. Rivers require remediation. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt, always. Rag paper production peaked in the 18th century, declined with wood pulp, mechanical mills, synthetic fibers, but never disappeared. Artisans continued, discrete workshops available, tradition found outlets. The practice adapted. Memory doesn't vanish, it changes medium. The page follows. Always. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto historical documents. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The page doesn't change, the viewer does. We bring our fears to old fiber. The text just reflects them back. Context clears the water. Always. Chemical recipes evolved slowly, trial and error, accident and innovation. Millers shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded secrets. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear. It was chemical. One spill taught more than a sermon. The vat educated. Always. Contemporary papermaking focuses on safety, precision, craftsmanship, practitioners trained in material science, techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues. Refined, ethical, compassionate. Remembrance still requires framing. We learn from the chlorine. We soften the process. The need remains. The method healed. Always. Historical paper survives through care. Proper storage, climate control, handling protocols, conservation efforts. Each sheet preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. The archive persists. We don't just keep fiber, we keep promises. The makers asked to be remembered. We obey, always. Psychological studies confirm tactile exposure aids grief processing, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The page holds meaning. Loss needs anchor. We return to the shelf, not to escape absence, to measure survival. The paper maps the journey. Always. The archive tells story not of vanity, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each sheet represents relationship. Each fiber preserves connection. The pulping process mirrors emotional one. Slow, painful, necessary. The ream endures. We mistake utility for meaning. It's just humanity wearing a different frame. The chemistry proves it. Always. Modern technology digitizes, preserves, shares, but cannot replace original. The sheet holds weight. The fiber carries. Texture. The page reflects memory differently. Digital replicates. Original exists. Both serve. Memory requires multiple vessels. Pixels lack density. Pulp carries gravity. We need both. The archive knows, always. The sludge settles. The vats stabilize. The archive closes. But the fiber remains. You came for history. You leave with recognition. The paper never stole words. It only held space for what we couldn't carry. Step back, wipe your hands, breathe. The pressing ends. The memory stays, always. Listen, the water remembers you too. They didn't mold elegance, they ground it from graves. Before the porcelain glaze, there was the kill. Before the tea service, there was the mortar. The first bone china wasn't craft. It was alchemy of the dead. This isn't about tableware. It's about what we pulverize to make beauty bearable. Step closer. The dust is still in the lungs. Listen, the silence has a weight. 18th century, Staffordshire. Potters chased whiteness. Clay turned gray when fired. They needed strength, translucency, a surface that caught candlelight like skin. The breakthrough came from waste. Butcher yards, slaughterhouses, tanneries, discarded cattle bones, calcined, crushed, sieved, mixed. With kaolin and feldspar, the paste held, the glaze took. The result was impossible. Translucent, resonant. When tapped, it rang like a bell. They called it bone china. The workers called it ground graveyard. Now the preparation was brutal. Bones boiled to strip fat, baked until brittle, hammered by hand, ground in stamping mills. The dust filled the air. Silica, calcium, phosphate. Fine as smoke, heavy as guilt. Workers inhaled it with every breath. The mills ran without ventilation. Management called it necessary friction. Doctors called it trade hazard. The real cost sat in the chest, settled in the alveoli, scarred the tissue. The porcelain gleamed. The lungs turned to stone. 19th century. The empire demanded refinement. Tea culture exploded. Bone china became status. But the dark turned darker. Victorian mourning etiquette required permanence. Grief needed vessel. Potters adapted. They mixed actual human remains into the clay. Not metaphor. Literal ash, cremated relatives, pulverized teeth, ground femur fragments. Families commissioned custom services. Plates that held the dead. Cups that poured memory. The kill didn't burn away identity. It fused it. The table became altar. The meal became communion. Factory floors were tombs. Of dust, stampers developed potter's rot, silicosis, coughing black phlegm, fingers clubbed from chronic oxygen deprivation. Sleep vanished. Appetite failed. Life expectancy dropped to 32. Owners provided no masks, no screens, no compensation. Turnover was expected. Replacement was cheap. The craft consumed. The archive remembered. Progress forgot its builders. History kept their names. The porcelain doesn't lie. The aristocracy dined on ground bones, sipped tea from cups containing their ancestors. They called it sentiment, called it tradition, called it love. They never asked about the hands that molded it, never visited the stamping yards, never heard the coughing in the alleyways behind the factories. The disconnect wasn't accident, it was design. Elegance required distance. Beauty required denial. The plate held reflection. The worker held decay. Both served the same master. The chemistry demanded precision. Bone ash provided calcium phosphate, increased translucency, strengthened the matrix. But it also increased fragility during shaping. Pots cracked, glaze crawled. Kilns exploded from thermal shock. Potters learned to read the clay, to feel the moisture, to trust the tremor in their hands. The dust coated their skin, turned sweat to slurry, dried into a second layer, and they washed it off at shift end. The water ran white. The lungs kept the rest. Mid-century. Morning porcelain peaked. Jet black glazes, gold leaf names, dates of birth, dates of death. Miniature portraits fired into the surface. Families displayed them in parlors, touched them during vigils, spoke to them in whispers. The objects anchored grief, structured loss, made absence tangible. Psychologists later noted the comfort. The ritual provided container. The vessel held the unholdable. Death became domestic. The kill made it safe. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived. Too late. Silica exposure limits proposed. Ventilation mandates drafted. Compensation boards formed. The damage remained. Archives hold factory logs, medical reports, death certificates. Names listed as consumption, respiratory failure, unknown cause. The truth sat in the dust. Bone china production shifted. Synthetic alternatives tested. But the formula held. The market demanded authenticity. The tradition adapted. Grief doesn't vanish. It changes material. The plate follows. Contemporary. Artists study the era, not for replication, for reckoning. They examine ledgers, mortuary records, factory blueprints. They trace the lineage of domestic grief, how suffering became decor, how mortality became merchandise, how the home absorbed the cemetery. The past doesn't repeat, it refines. Digital age changed nothing. We still curate absence. We still frame loss. We still seek permanence in fragile things. The screen glows. The archive loads. The dependency deepens. Historians archive the pieces, the ledgers, the dust samples, the kill records. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through surface, through alchemy, through denial. The glaze holds history. The clay holds memory. Both linger. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern studios use filtration, respirators, closed milling. Artisans work safely, but the legacy remains. Historical factories contaminated. Archives require care. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt. Psychological studies confirm. Object attachment aids grief processing, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The plate holds meaning. Loss needs anchor. We return to the shelf, not to escape absence, to measure survival. The porcelain maps the journey. Contemporary ceramics focus on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in material science. Techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues, refined, ethical, compassionate. Remembrance still requires framing. We learn from the silica. We soften the process. The need remains. The method healed. The dust settles. The kilns cool. The archive closes. But the resonance remains. You came for history. You leave with recognition. The bone china never stole elegance. It only held space for what we couldn't carry. Step back, wipe your hands, breathe, the firing ends. The memory stays, always. Listen, the silence remembers you too. They didn't paint perfection. They ground it from poison. Before the porcelain finish, there was the mortar. Before the courtly grin, there was the rot. The first white faces weren't fashion. They were chemical surrender. This isn't about vanity. It's about what we scraped onto skin to hide the decay beneath. Step closer. The powder is still in the air. Listen, the silence has a weight. 16th century, Venice. The recipe was simple. Lead metal, vinegar, air, sheets of lead. Hung over crocks of fermenting wine, fumes rose, oxidation formed. A white crust scraped off daily. Ceruse, Venetian white. Pure lead carbonate. Courtesans and nobles mixed it with water, rose water, egg whites. Applied it thick, left it to dry. The result was flawless. Porcelain, ageless. It hid scars, hid smallpox, pits, hid exhaustion. It also ate them alive. Lead absorbed through pores, through breath, through cracked lips. The mask didn't just sit on skin, it seeped, always. The court demanded more. Thicker layers, longer wear. Removal required vinegar. Washes, alum scrubs, harsh abrasives. The skin broke down. Ceruse filled the cracks. The cycle tightened. Hair fell out in clumps. Eyebrows vanished. Receding hairlines covered by wigs soaked in mercury. The scalp wept. The face gleamed. Beauty required erosion, always. 17th century. The trend crossed the Alps. France adopted it. England embraced it. Monarchs wore it. Queens commissioned it. Physicians warned against it. They were ignored. The aesthetic had become status. Pale skin meant leisure, wealth, distance from the sun, from labor, from life itself. The whiter the face, the higher the station, the closer to death. The court didn't care. They layered it on. Mourning ritual, Midday touch-up. Evening removal that never fully worked. Lead accumulated. Blood levels rose. Nerves frayed. Hands trembled. Gums turned blue. Teeth loosened. The smile remained painted. Always. Alchemists tried to fix it. They added mercury to brighten. Added arsenic to tighten pores. Added sulfur to mask the metallic taste. Each additive accelerated the decay. Patients reported colic, agonizing abdominal cramps that doubled them over. Doctors prescribed more lead, called it balancing humors, called it purging. The real purge was happening in the kidneys, in the bones, in the brain. Lead crossed the blood-brain barrier, settled in neural tissue, caused irritability, insomnia, paranoia, hallucinations. Courtiers whispered of demons, of curses, of divine punishment. The truth sat in the cosmetic jar, always. Removal became torture. Skins left off in sheets, raw flesh exposed. Ceruse applied again to cover the damage. The paste acted as a temporary seal, dried into a second skin, cracked with expression. The famous white smile wasn't joy, it was structural failure. The face couldn't move without fracturing, so they stopped moving. Adopted stillness, posed, performed composure. The portrait captured grace. The sitter felt paralysis. Always. 18th century. The collapse accelerated. Generations of heavy users reached critical toxicity. Wrist drop, foot drop, nerves misfiring, muscles atrophying. Women couldn't hold fans, couldn't pour tea, couldn't lift children. Men couldn't sign documents, couldn't ride horses, couldn't draw swords. The court adapted. Servants fed them, carried them, dressed them. The elite became invalids by design. The powder promised youth, it delivered premature decay. The mirror reflected porcelain. The body housed rubble, always. Psychologists of the era documented the dependency, not chemical, psychological. The white face became identity, removal felt. Like nakedness, like exposure, like shame. Women refused to appear without it, even in bed, even in fever, even as organs failed. The mask outlived the maker. The habit outlived the body. Addiction wasn't new. It was just powdered. Always. Physicians finally connected the dots. Late 1700s. Case studies compiled. Symptoms mapped. Lead colic. Painter's palsy. Cosmetics linked to systemic failure. Warnings issued, pamphlets printed. The aristocracy dismissed them. Called them peasant fears. Called them moral panic. Called them attacks on refinement. The science was clear. Culture was deaf. The jars kept opening. The brushes kept dipping. The smiles kept cracking. Always. The ritual demanded sacrifice. Mourning began with scraping. Old layers removed. New layers applied. Drying time, setting powder, rouge on cheeks, kohl on eyes. The transformation took hours. Exhaustion set in before noon. By evening, tremors began. Sleep offered no relief. Lead dreams, vivid, terrifying. Waking to metallic taste, to gum pain, to hair on the pillow. The cycle repeated. Day after day, year after year, until the body quit. Always. Social isolation followed. Heavy users avoided close contact. Breath carried chemical odor. Skin shed flakes. Eyes yellowed. Friends drifted. Lovers hesitated. The court maintained appearances through distance, through fans, through gloves, through painted perfection that required physical separation. The whiter the face, the lonelier the wearer. The mask promised connection. It delivered quarantine. Always. Modern toxicology confirms the damage. Lead disrupts enzyme function, replaces calcium in bone, stores for decades, releases during stress, during pregnancy, during illness. Historical portraits show flawless complexions. Autopsy records show blackened organs, shrunken brains, brittle bones. The contrast isn't coincidence, it's chemistry. The face lead. The skeleton told the truth, always. The temporary artists study the Ceruse era, not for replication, for warning. They examine portraiture techniques, cosmetic ledgers, medical journals. They trace the lineage of beauty standards, how suffering became aesthetic, how toxicity became trend, how the market profits from decay. The past doesn't repeat, it refines. Always. Digital age changed nothing. Filters replace ceruse. Apps smooth skin, erase pores, hide fatigue. The demand for porcelain remains. The chemistry shifted. The psychology didn't. We still scrape perfection onto our faces, still ignore the cost, still chase the unattainable finish. The screen glows, the algorithm approves, the dependency deepens, always. Historians archive the jars, the brushes, the warning pamphlets, the court ledgers. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of surrender. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through surface, through alchemy, through denial. The powder holds history. The skin holds memory. Both linger. Always. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern cosmetics regulated. LED banned. Heavy metals monitored. Artisans work safely, but the legacy remains. Historical formulas contaminated. Archives require care. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt, always. Cyrus production peaked in the 17th century, declined with medical awareness, social shifts, ethical reforms, but never disappeared. Compounded secretly, used in theater, in mourning, in rebellion. The tradition adapted. Vanity doesn't vanish, it changes. Formula, the jar follows. Always. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto historical portraits. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The image doesn't change, the viewer does. So we bring our fears to old paint. The finish just reflects them back. Context clears the surface. Always. Chemical recipes evolve slowly. Trial and error, accident and innovation. Cosmeticians shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded secrets. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear. It was chemical. One reaction taught more than a sermon. The workshop educated. Always. Contemporary cosmetics focus on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in dermatology. Techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues. Refined, ethical, compassionate. Beauty still requires framing. We learn from the lead, we softened the process, the need remains, the method healed. Always. Historical cosmetics survive through care, proper storage, climate control, handling protocols, conservation efforts. Each jar preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. The archive persists. We don't just keep powder, we keep promises. The makers ask to be remembered. We obey, always. Psychological studies confirm cosmetic use aids self-concept, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The jar holds meaning. Selfhood needs anchor. We return to the mirror, not to escape ourselves, to measure growth. The finish maps the journey. Always. The archive tells story not of vanity, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each layer represents relationship. Each application preserves connection. The Cyrus process mirrors emotional one, slow, painful, necessary. The powder endures. We mistake narcissism for meaning. It's just humanity wearing a different frame. The chemistry proves it. Always. Modern technology digitizes, preserves, shares, but cannot replace original. The jar holds weight. The powder carries texture. The finish reflects memory differently. Digital replicates. Original exists. Both serve. Memory requires multiple vessels. Pixels lack density. Lead carries gravity. We need both. The archive knows. Always. The dust settles. The jar stabilizes. The archive closes. But the finish remains. You came for history. You leave with recognition. The Cyrus never stole beauty. It only held space for what we couldn't face. Step back, wipe your hands, breathe. The application ends. The memory stays, always. Listen, the air remembers you too. They didn't bottle desire, they distilled death. Before the glass stopper, there was the knife. Before the velvet ribbon, there was the cage. The first perfumers weren't artists. They were butchers with alembics. This isn't about fragrance. It's about what we inhaled to forget the rot. Step closer. The air is still thick. Listen, the silence has a weight. 16th century. grass. Leather tanners needed masks for the stench of urine and lime. They turned to flowers, orange blossom, jasmine, rose. But petals wouldn't stick to skin, so they turned to fat, cold enfleurage. Layers of tallow layered with blossoms, scraped daily, melted, strained. The process took months. The workers, hands cracked from alkaline salts, their lungs filled with organic decay. The resulting pomade smelled of heaven. It carried the weight of slow suffocation. The trade demanded more than flowers. It demanded glands. Musk deer hunted in the Himalayas. Civet cats trapped in wicker cages in Ethiopia. Beavers culled in Canadian wetlands. The secretions were scraped, raw. The animals lived in filth, starved, driven mad by isolation. Their stress hormones concentrated in the paste. Perfumers called it animal warmth. Traders called it liquid gold. The creatures stopped vocalizing after the third month. The bottles gleamed. The cages rotted. 17th century. Paris embraced the scent. Plague years bred new terror. Miasma theory ruled. Bad air killed. Good air saved. Perfumed gloves became armor. Scented handkerchiefs waved in crowds. The aristocracy drowned in attar of roses, ambergris, civet. They believed fragrance purified, it only masked. Beneath the jasmine lay unwashed skin. Beneath the musk lay fever. Beneath the ambergris lay fear. The nose adjusted. The body did not. Extraction evolved. Alcohol replaced fat. Distillation required heat. Copper stills hissed. Ethanol vapor-filled workrooms. Workers developed distiller's tremor. Hands shook. Knees buckled. Memory frayed. Managers called it fatigue. Doctors called it nerves. The real culprit sat in the air, invisible, heavier than breath. The stills ran day and night. The lungs ran out of time. 18th century. The court demanded. Novelty. Chemists experimented with coal tar derivatives. Benzene, toluene, xylene. Extracted from gaslight. Residue. Cheap. Potent. Deadly. Perfumers blended them into modern florals. The scents were sharper, longer lasting, more addictive. Wearers reported euphoria, then headaches, then nosebleeds, then waking with blood on the pillow and no memory of the night. The bottle promised allure. It delivered neurological decay. Factories scaled. Grass became a chemical hub. Vats of solvent bubbled in open courtyards. Workers stirred with wooden paddles. No masks, no ventilation. Benzene seeped through skin, settled in bone marrow, suppressed blood production. Leukemia followed within. Years, families called it the pale sickness. Owners called it turnover. The ledgers balanced. The graves multiplied. Victorian era brought hysteria cures. Physicians prescribed smelling salts, lavender water, rosado. Women inhaled deeply, fainted, revived, fainted again. The cycle masked solvent psychosis, tremors, paranoia, sudden weeping. Doctors blamed weak constitutions. The real trigger sat on the vanity, a crystal atomizer, a silk-lined box, a daily ritual of slow poisoning. The mirror reflected pallor. The scent masked the decline. Perfumers learned to manipulate. Not just chemistry, psychology, top notes distracted. Heart notes seduced, base notes anchored. The sequence was engineered. Olfactory fatigue set in after 20 minutes. Wearers reapplied. The dose increased. The tolerance built. The brain rewired. Scent became dependency. Dependency became identity. The bottle didn't hold fragrance. It held compulsion. Animal harvesting intensified. Musk deer populations collapsed. Poachers used wire snares. Dogs tracked blood trails. Civet farms expanded. Cats force-fed fermented fruit to boost secretion yield. The paste turned rancid. Perfumers aged it in oak barrels. Called it maturation, called it depth. The truth sat in the sludge. Stress, fear, concentrated misery, distilled into luxury. The market didn't ask. It consumed. 19th century. Parisian department stores democratized scent. Glass counters, brass pumps, velvet testers. Clerks dabbed wrists. Customers inhaled, closed their eyes, smiled. They didn't know the clerks wiped down counters with pure ethanol. Didn't know. The testers contained benzene fixatives. didn't know the ventilation was decorative. They only knew the promise: youth, attraction, escape. The glass reflected hope. The air carried decay. Workers developed perfumer's cough. Dry, persistent, unresponsive to tonics. Lungs scarred. Airways narrowed. Sleep vanished. Some quit. Most couldn't. Rent demanded wages. Wages demanded exposure. The cycle tightened. The stills hissed. The bottles filled. The names changed. Chemistry DID, in single quote studies, psychological studies emerged. Physicians documented olfactory hallucinations. Patients swore they smelled roses in empty rooms, heard whispers in crowded halls, saw shadows in perfume shops. Doctors called it hysteria, called it imagination. The real trigger was chronic benzene exposure, neurotoxicity, synaptic misfire. The brain misread poison as memory. The nose betrayed the mind. Early 20th century. Regulations arrived. Too late. Benzene banned in cosmetics. Replaced by phthalates, then aldehydes, then synthetics. Each safer alternative carried new unknowns. The industry adapted. The damage remained. Archives hold factory logs, medical reports, death certificates, names listed as respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, unknown, because the truth sat in the air. Modern perfumers study the old formulas, not for replication, for understanding. They trace lineage through solvent shifts, animal bans, synthetic breakthroughs. They know the cost. They respect the craft. They wear respirators. Now, work in laminar flow hoods, monitor air quality. The past demands protection. The present responds. Contemporary psychology confirms scent memory linkage. Olfactory bulb connects directly to amygdala, to hippocampus, emotion, recall, survival. Perfume didn't invent this. It weaponized it. A single spray triggers buried grief, lost love, childhood summers. The bottle doesn't hold flowers. It holds time, compressed, pressurized, ready to detonate. Digital age changed nothing. Algorithms recommend fragrances by mood, by season, by personality. We buy invisibly, spray blindly, trust the label. The chemistry is safer. The dependency isn't. We still chase the ghost, the perfect note. The one that makes us feel whole, the one that masks the quiet dread. The screen glows, the atomizer clicks, the air shifts. Historians archive the bottles, the ledgers, the cages, the stills. Each artifact tells a story of extraction, of adaptation, of survival. The industry evolved. The impulse didn't. We still seek transformation through scent, through alchemy, through surrender. The glass holds history. The air holds memory. Both linger. Chemical safety improved dramatically. Modern labs use closed systems, protective gear, exposure monitoring. Artisans work safely. But the legacy remains. Historical factories contaminated. Archives require remediation. History demands accountability. The craft evolved. We protect now because they couldn't. The archive holds the debt. Scent production peaked in the late 19th century, declined with synthetics, animal bans, ethical shifts, but never disappeared. Artisans continued. Discreet workshops available. Vanity found outlets. The tradition adapted. Desire doesn't vanish, it changes formula. The bottle follows. Modern viewers project contemporary values onto antique perfumes. Judgment replaces understanding. Discomfort overrides context. Education bridges gap. Knowledge transforms perspective. The object doesn't change. The viewer does. We bring our fears to old glass. The scent just triggers them back. Context clears the air. Chemical recipes evolve slowly. Trial and error. Accident and innovation. Perfumers shared techniques cautiously. Competitors guarded secrets. Collaboration occurred underground. Knowledge spread gradually. The craft advanced. Progress wasn't linear, it was chemical. One spill taught more than a textbook. The workshop educated. Contemporary perfumery focuses on safety, precision, craftsmanship. Practitioners trained in material science, techniques adapted for sustainability. The ritual continues. Refined, ethical, compassionate. Desire still requires framing. We learned from the benzene. We softened the process. The need remains. The method healed. Historical perfumes survive. Through care, proper storage, climate control, handling protocols, conservation efforts. Each bottle preserved honors the original intent. Memory demands maintenance. The archive persists. We don't just keep glass, we keep promises. The makers ask to be remembered. We obey. Psychological studies confirm scent exposure aids emotional processing, provides continuity, reduces dissociation, structures identity. The object serves function. The ritual provides comfort. The bottle holds meaning. Selfhood needs anchor. We return to the spray, not to escape ourselves, to measure growth. The fragrance maps the journey. The archive tells story, not of vanity, of labor, of chemistry, of survival. Each drop represents relationship. Each scent preserves connection. The distillation process mirrors emotional one, slow, painful, necessary. The glass endures. We mistake narcissism for meaning. It's just humanity wearing a different frame. The chemistry proves it. Modern technology digitizes, preserves, shares, but cannot replace original. The bottle holds weight. The liquid carries texture. The scent reflects memory differently. Digital replicates. Original exists. Both serve. Memory requires multiple vessels. Pixels lack density. Glass carries gravity. They didn't invent reflection. They poisoned it. Before the silver, there was mercury. Before the vanity, there was glass. The first mirrors weren't furniture. They were altars to self-obsession, backed by liquid metal and human breath. This isn't about seeing yourself. It's about what we sacrificed to make the reflection possible. Step closer. The glass is still cold. Listen. The silence has a weight. 16th century, Murano, Venice, glassblowers. Guarded the recipe for clear crystal like a state secret. But clarity wasn't enough. They wanted reflection. The breakthrough came from a toxic slurry, molten tin and mercury pressed against the back of flawless glass. The result was blinding. Perfect. Deadly. Artisans worked in sealed rooms, breathing vaporized mercury by the hour. Tremors came first, then memory loss, then the shaking hands that could no longer hold a blowpipe. The Republic called it the Murano cough. The workers called it the silver death. The mirrors gleamed, the lungs collapsed, the trade demanded flesh. Always. Venice imprisoned glassblowers on the island, not for crime, for protection. Defectors faced execution. The recipe was worth more than gold. Families lived in walled compounds. Children learned the craft before they learned to read. Generations inhaled the same air, the same poison, the same slow unraveling. When a master's hands finally gave out, he was retired to a quiet room, given a mirror, told to watch himself fade. The Republic knew exactly what it had built. A legacy of light, funded by decay. 17th century. France wanted the mirrors. Louis XIV's minister, Colbert, orchestrated industrial espionage. Spies infiltrated Murano, bribed artisans, smuggled techniques across the Alps. The Venetian Senate issued death warrants. Some defectors made it. Most didn't. The ones who survived built the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. 357 panes, 17 arches, a cathedral of reflection. Courtiers wept at their own faces. Nobles commissioned private chambers. The sun caught the glass. The mercury caught the workers. The palace dazzled. The artisans vanished. History recorded the architecture. It forgot the blood and the backing. The Hall of Mirrors wasn't just vanity. It was psychological warfare. Louis XIV understood something primal. When people see themselves endlessly reflected, they lose their grip on reality. Courtiers reported paranoia, sleeplessness, sudden rages. The king encouraged it. A fractured mind was easier to control. A self-obsessed noble forgot to plot rebellion. The mirrors didn't just show faces, they showed weakness. The court danced in front of them. The glass absorbed their fear. Always. 18th century. Mirror madness became clinical. Physicians documented patients who couldn't stop staring, who smashed glass when the reflection frowned, who whispered to their own eyes until their throats bled. Asylums filled with speculum obsessives. Doctors prescribed leeches, purges, ice baths. None worked. The mirror had already rewired the brain. It offered a self that never aged, never judged, never left. Patients clung to it like a drug. The glass became a cage. The reflection became the warden. Always. Artisans continued to die. Mercury poisoning, mimicked madness, tremors, paranoia, hallucinations. Factory owners blamed weak constitutions. Families buried sons at 25, called it consumption, called it grief. The real culprit sat in copper vats, evaporated over open flames, settled in bone. The craft killed quietly. The mirrors outlived the makers, always. Justus von Liebig changed everything in 1835, a German chemist. He replaced mercury with silver, nitrate, and ammonia. Safer, faster, cheaper. The backing process no longer required open vats of poison. Factories scaled, mirrors democratized. Suddenly, every parlor could afford one. Every bedroom, every hallway. The working class saw themselves for the first time, not in polished brass, not in still water, in glass. Perfect, unforgiving. The psychological shift was immediate. Vanity exploded. Self-scrutiny became obsession. The mirror was no longer luxury, it was necessity. And it was watching back. 19th century factories employed thousands, mostly women, mostly children. They cleaned the glass, polished the edges, applied the silvering solution. They worked in poorly ventilated rooms. Ammonia burned their eyes. Silver nitrate stained their skin black. They called it argyria of the fingers. Management called it trade stains. They wore no masks, no gloves. The fumes clung to their hair, their clothes, their breath. They went home smelling of chemicals. Their children coughed in their sleep. The industry called it progress. The workers called it Tuesday, always. Psychological studies emerged. Physicians noted rising rates of dysmorphia, anxiety, compulsive grooming. The mirror didn't create these conditions. It amplified them. It gave insecurity a surface. It gave doubt a frame. People began editing themselves in real time, adjusting. Posture, fixing hair, practicing smiles. The reflection became a rehearsal. Life became performance. The glass didn't lie. It just demanded perfection. Always. Late 19th century. The old mercury mirrors were phased out, but not discarded. They were sold to antique dealers, displayed in museums, hung in grand homes. Collectors prized the depth of antique glass, the slight warp, the golden tint. They didn't know why it felt different, why it seemed to breathe, why standing too long left them dizzy. The mercury was still there, trapped between glass and wood, slowly outgassing, filling rooms with invisible poison. Families slept behind the glass. Children played in front of it. The past leaked into the present. The archive held the vapor. Always. 20th century. Psychology formalized the mirror stage. Theorists wrote about infants recognizing themselves, about identity forming through reflection, about the self as construct. They didn't mention the glass. They didn't mention the mercury. They didn't mention the centuries of artisans who went blind shaking. They didn't mention the women who scrubbed silver until their fingerprints vanished. They wrote about theory. They lived the Costa. Always. Modern conservators handle antique mirrors with respirators. Mercury residue remains active. Some develop neurological symptoms. Others report metallic taste, tremors, night terrors. The glass is stable. The backing is not. Museums store them in sealed vaults, climate-controlled, monitored. The past is hazardous. History demands protection. Always. We touch the surface. The surface touches back. Chemistry never forgets. Contemporary. Artists use broken mirrors to comment on fragmentation, selfhood, surveillance. They piece together shards, create mosaics of reflection. Viewers see themselves fractured, multiplied, unstable. The work is haunting, not because of technique. Because of truth. We all live in fragments. We all edit ourselves. We all fear the unvarnished face. The mirror records the split. Always. Digital screens replaced glass, but not the psychology. We still curate ourselves. We still stare. We still adjust. We still perform. Front-facing cameras, filters, editing apps. The ritual didn't change. Only the medium. We scroll past our own faces daily. We measure validation. We track angles. We fear the unfiltered moment. The screen still freezes. The hunger for perfection stays. Always. Historians trace family heirlooms through mirror collections. Names lost to census records survive in glass. Faces unknown to genealogy endure in silver backing. The mirror outlives memory. The archive becomes ancestry. We study the object to understand the maker. The glass holds both. Blood fades, reflection lasts. The past waits in frames, always. Chemical formulas were trade secrets. Glassblowers guarded ratios fiercely. Tin percentages, mercury temperatures, cooling times. Some added arsenic to clarify crystal. Others used lead to weight the backing. Clarity was pharmacological. The image lied. The chemistry revealed. Beauty required poison. Transparency demanded control. The furnace knew both. Always. Factory floors were designed for flow, not safety. Glass moved on conveyor belts. Backing stations lined the walls. Ventilation was an afterthought. Workers stood shoulder to shoulder, breathing the same air, sharing the same fate. Management tracked output, not health. Turnover was expected. Replacement was cheap. The craft consumed, the archive remembered. Progress forgot its builders. History kept their names. The glass doesn't lie. Always. Modern conservators use non-invasive techniques. X-ray fluorescence, infrared reflectography, multispectral imaging. Analysis reveals chemical composition, degradation patterns, restoration attempts. Science serves history. Technology honors tradition. The glass yields secrets. We look closer, not to judge, to understand. The chemistry speaks. We listen, always. Psychological research shows mirror exposure increases self-awareness. Initially uncomfortable, then clarifying, then compulsive. The reflection provides feedback. The ritual structures grooming. The glass anchors identity. Selfhood needs form. The mirror provides. We return to the surface, not to escape reality, to navigate it. The image maps the self, always. Contemporary artists revive historical processes, not for nostalgia, for truth. Mercury backing demands patience, forces presence, requires acceptance of toxicity. The process mirrors obsession, slow, unpredictable, uncontrollable. The glass records surrender. We choose difficulty not for art, for honesty. The chemistry won't lie, always. Historical mirrors require ethical handling. Provenance questions, toxicity concerns, cultural sensitivity. Archivists navigate carefully. Some pieces restricted, others displayed. Context guides access. Respect dictates placement. The past demands care. The present responds. We don't now. They didn't steal souls, they poisoned them. Before the flash, there was mercury. Before the smile, there was wire. The first photographers weren't artists. They were gravekeepers with glass plates. This isn't about capturing moments. It's about what we sacrifice to freeze them. Step closer. The chemicals are still wet. Listen, the silence has a weight. 1839 Paris. Daguerre's silver plates demanded 15 minutes of absolute stillness. The living fainted. The dying were perfect. Studios advertised post-vital portraits. Grief became geometry. Iron brackets propped heavy heads. Eyelids were painted open. The camera didn't lie. It just waited. Breath held until lungs burned. Stillness was the price. Mercury vapor developed the plates. Photographers inhaled it daily. Tremors came first. Then memory loss. Then the Hatter's shakes. Studios reeked of metallic sweat. Workers called it the silver sickness. Managers called it overhead. The plates gleamed, the hands shook, the trade demanded flesh. The darkroom wasn't creative. It was chemical warfare. Victorian mothers hired posing ladies to cradle dead infants. These women knew the exact weight of stillness. They held small bodies until the exposure completed. No tears allowed. Moisture ruined the emulsion. Grief had to be dry. The photograph captured love. The process demanded numbness. Families paid for perfection. The performers paid in silence. Early lenses couldn't capture color, so they painted it in. Cheeks rouged with carmine, lips tinted with lead oxide, eyes glazed with varnish to simulate life. The dead looked healthier than the living. Families paid extra for vitality retouching. The camera preserved. The artist lied. Both were necessary. Light became a merciful fiction. 1850s America. Traveling daguerreotypists rode wagons into plague towns. They offered final likeness packages, discounts for multiples. Families bought 3, one for the parlor, one for the coffin, one for the grave. The photographer packed mercury in lead boxes. He left with silver and silence. The road swallowed. His name, the plates kept it. Exposure times bred new rituals. Children were drugged with laudanum to stay still. Elders were strapped to wooden chairs. The resulting images show wide eyes, rigid postures, faint smiles. Not peace, paralysis. The camera recorded survival. The shutter clicked. The body forgot how to breathe. Studios doubled as apothecaries. Cyanotype required potassium ferrocyanide. Collodion needed ether and alcohol. Developers used arsenic compounds. Photographers mixed chemicals by candlelight. Explosions were common, burns were routine, hands cracked, lungs scarred. The archive demanded sacrifice. Flesh failed. Chemistry remembered. Spiritualists loved photography. Double exposures created spirit faces. Grieving families paid premiums. For evidence of departed loved ones, photographers learned to manipulate plates, add ghostly overlays, fake ectoplasm. The line between documentation and seance dissolved. Light became medium. Grief bought what science couldn't promise. The plate delivered illusion. 1860s. The tintype era democratized death photography. Iron plates replaced silver. Cheaper. Faster. Soldiers carried them to war. Families received them posthumously. A bullet hole, a bloodstain, a uniform. The image arrived before the telegram. Grief traveled by mail. The postman delivered closure. The iron held it forever. Post-mortem portraits followed strict conventions. Eyes closed for infants, open for adults, hands folded. Books placed nearby, flowers arranged. The composition screamed order. The reality was chaos. Studios published posing guides. Grief had rules. Deviation meant poor taste or poor business. The camera demanded compliance. The heart obeyed. Mercury blindness became occupational. Pupils dilated permanently. Night vision vanished. Photographers navigated by touch. They memorized tray positions, chemical ratios, exposure counts. The dark room became tactile. The eyes failed. The hands adapted. Darkness wasn't the setting. It was a condition. They worked inside it. 1870s. Gelatin dry plates reduced exposure to seconds. The dead could be photographed quickly, but the ritual persisted. Families demanded the old compositions. Stillness remained sacred. Speed changed nothing. Tradition outlived technology. Progress couldn't outrun mourning. The pose stayed rigid. Photographers developed death masks as backup, plaster casts of faces before decomposition. Some studios offered combined packages, photograph plus mask, guaranteed likeness. Families stored them in velvet boxes, opened them on anniversaries. The plaster outlasted the photo. Memory required weight, light faded, stone endured. Arsenic green wallpaper adorned many parlors where photos hung. Shields green contained copper arsenite. Damp rooms released toxic vapor. Families died slowly while staring at images of the dead. The photograph preserved life. The room consumed it. The walls breathed poison. The frames held ghosts. Both lingered. 1880s. Flash powder arrived. Magnesium and potassium chlorate. Explosive, blinding. Photographers ignited it indoors. Windows shattered. Ears rang. Subjects flinched. The resulting images show startled expressions. Smoke haze. Chemical burns. The dead didn't care. The living paid for the shock. Light became violence. Child mortality drove the industry. 1 in 5 died before age 5. Photographers specialized in infant postmortems, swaddled, posed, lit like saints. Mothers commissioned. Multiple angles. He looks asleep, they'd say. The photographer nodded. He knew the difference. Silence was professional. Grief was commercial. The lens never blinked. Silver nitrate turned skin black. Nitric acid ate fingernails. Photographers wore gloves indoors, removed them to feel the plates. Tactile feedback mattered more than safety. The craft demanded sacrifice. The body paid the toll. The archive kept the rest. Flesh failed. Chemistry remembered. 1890s. Kodak simplified photography. You press the button. But death photography remained artisanal. Mass market avoided corpses. Professionals kept the tradition. Studios in basements, back alleys, funeral homes, discreet, respectful, profitable. Grief needed specialists. The amateur clicked. The master prepared. Double exposure tricks evolved. Photographers captured the living, then reloaded plates with dead relatives. Combined them seamlessly. Families wept at reunions. The technique required precision, patience, chemical knowledge, fraud, or comfort. The line blurred. Light manipulated truth. The plate lied beautifully. Grief believed it gladly. Mercury vapor accumulated in studio floors. Wood absorbed it. Decades later, renovations released toxic clouds. Workers developed neurological damage. Historians later tested floorboards. Readings exceeded safety limits by 400%. The past poisoned the present. The plates gleamed. The soil remembered. History doesn't fade. It seeps. Postmortem photography peaked during epidemics: cholera, yellow fever, influenza. Studios operated around the clock. Photographers worked in shifts, developed plates by lantern light, delivered prints before decomposition accelerated. Speed became mercy. Quality became secondary. Survival dictated art. The plague moved fast. The camera moved faster. Victorian mourning etiquette demanded photographs. Widows displayed them on altars. Children kept them in lockets. Soldiers carried them to trenches. The image became relic. The subject became saint. The photographer became priest. Light consecrated. Chemistry preserved. Grief standardized. Ritual gave chaos shape. The plate held the form. Early film stock was nitrate-based, highly flammable. Archives burned regularly. Thousands of post-mortem portraits lost to fire. Families lost their only likeness. Photographers lost their livelihoods. The medium destroyed itself. Memory proved fragile. The archive wept in smoke. What we save often consumes us. Fire doesn't discriminate. 1900s. Color photography emerged. Hand tinting replaced chemical processes. But post-mortem demand declined. Medicine advanced. Child mortality dropped. Grief became private. Studios pivoted to weddings and portraits. The death photographer faded. The tradition went underground. Progress hides what it replaces. The camera kept walking. Modern archivists handle original plates with gloves. Mercury residue remains active. Some develop contact dermatitis. Others report headaches, dizziness, metallic taste. The chemicals outlive the creators. The archive is hazardous. History demands protection. We touch the past touches back. Chemistry never forgets. Psychological studies examine viewer reactions to post-mortem photos. Initial discomfort, then recognition, then empathy. The uncanny valley isn't about fear, it's about familiarity. We see ourselves in the stillness. The camera doesn't capture death, it captures our relationship to it. We stare because we recognize the pose. We've all worn it. Contemporary artists recreate the process. Mercury vapor, glass plates, long exposures. They photograph the living as if dead. The results are haunting, not because of technique, because of truth. We all sit still for the camera. We all pretend to be immortal. The plate records the lie, the shutter clicks. Time pretends to stop. Digital photography erased chemical risk, but not psychological weight. We still curate death. We still stage. Grief, we still demand likeness. The medium changed. The ritual didn't. We scroll past digital post-mortems, daily obituaries, tributes, final posts. The camera still freezes. Pixels replaced silver. The hunger stayed identical. Historians trace family lines through post-mortem collections. Names lost to records survive in glass. Faces unknown to genealogy endure in silver. The photograph outlives memory. The archive becomes ancestry. We